Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Yaron Brook Show. I am broadcasting this show from Porto Alegre, Brazil. So we're going to talk a little bit about my experiences here in Brazil, in Argentina, and what I have planned for the rest of the week, because I'm going to be traveling some more this week. Let me just make sure that in terms of, let me just work on this, in terms of the logistics, in terms of all the operations, everything is working, and make sure we've got everything right. Apologize. All right, we've got Facebook seems to be working. We've got a few people there. YouTube seems to be working. We've got a few people there. Blog Talk Radio seems to be working. We've got a few people there, although I encourage those on Blog Talk to go watch it on YouTube or Facebook, because I think it'll be better. All right, I think we are all set. Let's rock and roll. All right, as I said, you are listening to Yaron Brook Show, and we are today going to talk about, Brazil. We're going to talk about Argentina, and inevitably, we will have a little bit of talk about trade and trade wars and maybe some other stuff that's going on out there in the world. So on Monday, I arrived in Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, and they had a whole series of events organized for me in Argentina. I did 4 events total, four formal events. First evening, I spoke to, I guess, a local group of objectivists and some of their friends. It was about 50 people, if I remember right. And it was great. It was great. Great questions, great interaction. It was it was all fun. Morality of capitalism, my kind of standard speech, but it's always good, particularly when I speak a different language than the people there. It's always good to give people an opportunity to ask questions and to be engaged and to experience the whole thing live. So that went really well. Next day, I gave a wow. It's like my memory is blanking out on me in terms of what I've actually done this week. You know how I tell the story about if you lie, you have to remember too many things, and man, too many things. I have to remember too many things. So I don't lie, right? Because life's too complicated as it is. If I had to lie, oh my God. So we did a lunch event at the local university. God, man. All right, in a law school, in a law class. I gotta go into a law class. There were about 60 kids there. Got to talk about inequality, but it turned into a free fall because they were full of questions and they were challenging me and everything. And it was great because these were what I like to call virgins, right? These were real virgins. Never really heard the case for objectivism or for free markets or for capitalism or for individual liberty. Never really heard the case for egoism, for rational egoism. So it was fantastic. They had the right kind of questions that I love getting from people who completely knew about it. They were like in awe. Like, really? You think that? Really? That's possible? All of that was really terrific, and it was a lot of fun. And I probably spoke for about an hour and a half. And they could have kept going. I mean, unfortunately, the class had to be let out because another professor had the class for his teaching. But I could have gone for 2-3 hours. These kids had lots of questions. It's smart kids, intelligent kids, but completely new to this. So really, I mean, those are my favorites. I have to say, those are my favorite talks. My favorite talks are to virgins, to people who've never heard about this, who've never known. And this was a small enough group that there was a lot of interaction. There was a lot of back and forth. They got to ask a lot of questions. They got to hear a lot of answers. And it was great great exchange of ideas. So really terrific. And I think I got some converts. They wanted books afterwards. We gave them Atlas Shrugged, Fountainhead, gave them some of my books, and of course all the books are in Spanish. Not great translations necessarily, but all the books in Spanish, so they can all go and read Ayn Rand in Spanish. So none of them have excuses, and they all expressed the interest that was what they were going to do. They were all going to go out and read Ayn Rand, find me on the internet. Hopefully some of them are watching this, or some of them will be watching future podcasts, or watching some of my talks on YouTube. So a really good one. And then in the evening, this was Wednesday, I did a debate, a big debate. There were about 300 people there, 4 people debating. I don't really like that format, I have to say. Too many people. The discussion gets diffused because people, you don't get very much time to talk. So the debate was about, I think it was over an hour and a half, and it was on inequality. And it was me and Martin Krauss, who's a economist, who's a Cato fellow, a free market economist, and then 2, I'd say, left of center professors. And some of the discussion was pretty deep and pretty good. I mean, we got into property rights, are property rights legitimate? What are property rights? So some of the discussion was good. Some of it went too fast, and I think that's too bad. I do better on one-on-one debates, and I do better when I'm alone on the stage. But one-on-one debates are pretty good. But it was a good event. 300 people. It was a new organization put it together. That is now founded in Buenos Aires. It's devoted to free markets and capitalism, and really from an objectivist perspective, because the man running it is an objectivist. And they plan to do 7 debates. They've got funding to do 7 debates. This was the first one. They were really happy with the fact that 300 people showed up. Actually, they had 550 registrations. For some reason, about 250 people didn't show. But terrific to launch it like that. It's also affiliated with Intelligence Square. So this was the first Intelligence Square debate that I've done. I'm hoping to do many more. Although, again, I'm not crazy about the 2x2 format. So that was then. Then the next day I flew from Buenos Aires to Cordoba. Cordoba is in the west of the country. Agricultural area. So I was in Cordoba. I'd never been there before, my first time in Cordoba. And I spoke to a group of about 50 members of the Objectivist Club and their friends, and some people who are new. So it was a kind of a mixed group, some libertarians, some objectivists, some people who completely new. So one law professor came. And again, great event, really good event. I know people spent a lot of time organizing this and putting it together, so I thank them. But it was really a fantastic event, and great people all over Argentina. The people are fantastic, and they're motivated, and the people engaged in objectivism are committed. A number of them are in the OAC. A number of them, we're going to have a nice size contingent of Argentinians at OCON this year, at the Objectivist conferences in Newport Beach in July. So that's exciting. The fact that we will have as many people from Argentina there. So overall, fantastic. Now some impressions about Argentina. It's obviously. So this struck me the first time I was in Argentina. I mean, it really is pretty amazing. There are parts of Buenos Aires that could be Europe, that could be Paris, in the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. And indeed, until about 1918, Argentina was a very free economy and created immense amounts of wealth. It was about at 90% of the United States. So it was almost equal to the United States in terms of GDP per capita. So you can see in Buenos Aires the remnants of vast and amazing wealth, and what could have been. Right? If you go to, I did this last time. I didn't do this this visit, but last time I went to the cemetery in Buenos Aires. And I know you think, oh my God, Yaron, that's pretty morbid. But what my wife and I have discovered over the years is that some in rich cities, cities that were rich in the late 19th century, early 20th century, the cemeteries are some of the best sculpture museums anyway. Because what happened is when people died who had money, sculptures were created to celebrate their lives or to mourn their deaths, depending on the attitude of the people burying them, I guess. And it's truly quite spectacular. I think one of the best places in the world to see great sculpture is the cemetery in Milan. Milan in northern Italy. Milan was the richest city in Italy. It's an industrial city. It is the home of La Scala. It is the great opera company. It was historically the richest city in Italy. I mean, historically in terms of modern history, it's the industrial center of Italy. To this day, it's the richest city in Italy. But in the late 19th century, early 20th century, people had taste. They wanted beautiful sculptures. And you go to this place, the cemetery, and there are thousands of good sculptures. Italian carvers in marble, in Carrara marble, beautiful, beautiful things. I mean, you go to Verdi's mausoleum or Toscanini's mausoleum, but everything, everywhere you go there, just sculpture. It just was unbelievable. It was like overload, so much, and so many of them beautiful. A lot of them are sad, obviously, because it's a cemetery, but beautiful. Now, the same thing on a smaller scale is true of Buenos Aires. The Buenos Aires cemetery has some magnificent sculptures. And my wife and I spent a few hours there last time we were in Buenos Aires taking pictures, and it is truly amazing. So I highly recommend going to cemeteries of cities that used to be rich, or are rich, right? Rich today is okay as well, but cities where they valued sculpture, cities where they value, even in America, in New York, I think there's a cemetery that has some good sculptures. So anyway, it was so you get this sense of grandeur in the end of the 19th century, early 20th century in Buenos Aires. And then starting in 1918, but really starting in the 1930s with the rise of Perón, what you get is increased statism. What you get is the 1930s, the rise of basically fascism, mimicking the fascism of Europe, which continues really into the 1970s. And as fascism dominates, the country becomes poor. So if you look at graphs, America goes up, and Argentina stays flat, down, flat, up a little bit, but it basically doesn't move. So Argentina's wealth got stuck at where it was about in 1918, whereas American wealth continued to rise throughout the 20th century. And the gap between them today is astronomical. The United States, I think, is 4 times richer than Argentina on a per capita basis. So it's an incredible story of history. And again, as if we need more proof, as if we need more evidence, as if we need another concrete. Here's a concrete that when you allow people to be free, and it doesn't matter where in the world they are, it doesn't matter what genes they have, it doesn't matter what ethnic group they belong to. If you allow people to be free, if you leave them alone, if you establish the rule of law and property rights, as Argentina had from about the middle of the 19th century through 1918, they get rich. They produce culture. And it really is sad, tragic, depressing that people ignore this, and then they see the decline that happens under statism, but they want more statism. And of course, this goes to the heart of my argument that unless you address the issue of altruism and collectivism, nothing will budge. More evidence that tells us that capitalism works is not what the world needs. I mean, it would be great, but it's not what the world needs because we have all the evidence in the world that we need. Capitalism works, freedom works, property rights works, contract law works. leaving people free to pursue their own happiness, to pursue their own life, works. I mean, it's not the reason you should do it. It's not the only reason you should do it, right? It's right. It's my happiness. Who are you to restrict my ability to pursue it? But it's a beautiful thing to see it working, So in the 1980s, Argentina did quite a bit of liberalization of the economy. The problem is, just like Donald Trump today, and I'll draw a few parallels to Trump, is that while maybe they deregulated some and they opened up with trade and they created they moved towards more capitalism, if you would, slowly, tentatively, they moved in that direction. At the same time, they didn't cut government spending. So what happened was you got a massive deficit, a deficit that was not sustainable, a deficit that ultimately resulted in poor economic growth and the discrediting of the liberalization policies of the 1980s that led ultimately to the elections of the Kirchners, the husband and then the wife, to become president, and then moved back towards Peronism or fascism and statism, not the same kind of brutal fascism as the 1950s and 60s under Peron, but still an economic fascism that was and populism, and that was incredibly destructive to the Argentinian economy. So Argentina has suffered through almost 20 years of, again, stagnation and as a consequence, more poverty and more difficulties. And of course, now over the last 2 years, they've elected a president who is mildly better, another businessman, who is mildly better than the Kirchners were. Not great. Also, by the way, a little bit maybe like Donald Trump, a fan of the Fountainhead, and he's doing a little bit better. And you can tell Argentina is a little bit more vibrant. There's a little bit more dynamism. There's a little bit more going on right now. A little bit more going on right now. But this is the point relating to Trump. Cutting taxes and deregulation are all good, but you have to cut spending. Unless you cut spending, there will be a backlash. Unless you cut spending, you will pay the price. Unless you cut spending, you're driving the country in one way or the other, directly or indirectly, to bankruptcy. So, what the U.S. has to do, what the U.S. must do, is cut spending. And until you cut spending, nothing else really matters that much. So all the rest is BS. And of course, what Trump has done and what Republicans have done has significantly increased spending, not cut spending. So it's sad, right? It's sad. Now, of course, in addition to that, Argentina is filled, like every statist regime, is filled with corruption. Now, those of you who want me to talk about Brazil, I will. I'll talk about Brazil. I'll talk about Lulu in a minute. So be patient. Lula, I guess. I don't know why I call him Lulu. Maybe because he's Lulu. So Argentina is improving a little bit, but here's another related aspect. So one of the things you notice in Argentina is that the cars in the streets are small and old, and they're all manual shift, right? All of them, almost all of them are manual drive. And the question is why? And lots of different makes, and they're all European makes, almost all European makes, some Chevys, but you just don't see, almost in every other country I go to, you see a certain percentage of German cars and nice cars. In Argentina, very few. And the reason is simple. The amount of tariffs that have been placed on car manufacturers importing cars. And what has happened is that car manufacturers have been forced to build their cars in Argentina. Cars are more expensive, both because of the tariffs and because they're locally built. They don't have economies of scale. The cheapest cars to build are obviously small and manual drive. And that's what you get. And of course, the cheapest cars are used cars. So because the tariffs are so high, and because car manufacturing in Argentina itself is inefficient, car prices are very high, taxes are very high, tariffs are very high. the quality of cars, therefore, is that people buy are low, and they buy the simplest models because that's what they can afford. Again, a sign of the poverty, but more so a sign of the stupid, ridiculous, anti-capitalist ideas of anti-free market ideas of tariffs. So this links to the fact that I just saw a story about the Trump administration, right? Not only are we going to this so-called trade war with China, we'll talk about that later, but now, he doesn't want to just raise tariffs because there are limits, and he doesn't want to get into trade war. So what they're doing is they are going to, there's a proposal that Trump supports to try to protect domestic vehicle manufacturers by increasing the restrictions, the environmental restrictions on the cars being imported. So they are going to be held to a higher standard in terms of pollution than domestic cars and then the standards they're using right now. They're trying to figure out how they can use. Now notice this is the deregulation president. They're trying to figure out how to use the Clean Air Act to subject cars made overseas to strict emission standard testing and reviews when entering the United States. Stricter than what we do like in a smog test or what is standard in the US right now, right? The rules, this I'm quoting the Wall Street Journal, the rules could effectively require more expensive technology on some foreign cars or subject those cars to more expensive hurdles, that's the key, that can be billed to the manufacturer or importer. So in other words, what he's trying to do is raise the cost to Americans of foreign cars, thus doing two things, just like in Argentina. Encourage them to come and build in the United States, even though building in the United States is not the most efficient thing to do, even though building in the United States increases costs, or to raise prices. Either way, consumers are going to see higher prices for automobiles, right? So Trump is really serious about this idea of trying to bring manufacturing back, supposedly, as if it went away, to the United States. He is serious about penalizing imports. This is not a joke for him. This is not some tactic to open up borders and to force other countries to behave, if you will, to lower their tariffs. No, he really believes. He said in the campaign, he hasn't done it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did, that if companies moved their operations to Mexico, because in Mexico it's cheaper to produce, and then brought their products back into the United States, he would penalize that. And he's serious. He is going to do that. He is serious. He is a serious mercantilist. He is like the Kirchners in Argentina in terms of the mercantilism. And the Kirchners at some point had tariffs, had penalties, both on imports and on exports. Because there were shortages and people were exporting food. And they wanted to keep the food into Argentina because food in Argentina was going up in price because of all the regulations that aren't controlled domestically. That they wanted to make sure that the food stayed in Argentina, so they put in taxes for exportation. But they had this same kind of mercantilist, a perceptually bound, non-thinking, non-economic perspective on trade that Donald Trump has, and it's stunning to me. It's stunning to me that Trump is getting away with it, and almost nobody's calling on it. Almost nobody is challenging on it. If I were in Congress, I would put together a bill taking away the powers of the president to impose tariffs and to engage in trade wars, bringing them back to where they belong, trade treaties, to where they belong, which is Congress. That's what I would do if I was Paul Ryan in the House. I would put together a bill, a free trade bill, that basically declared the United States a free trade zone, lower tariffs unilaterally across all goods, and told the president to take a hike in the name of reason and the science of economics. So somebody's asking, I've answered this question before, but I guess I'll answer it again. Seen arguments in favor of steel tariffs based on steel being needed for military, as though that would be bottlenecked should military production need to increase. So first, the biggest importers of steel to the United States are allies: Canada, Mexico, and Brazil, and South Korea, all allies of the United States. So the fear that we would get stuck without steel, I think, is unfounded from a national defense perspective. But let's assume that you're really worried about that, I don't know, China could disrupt trade routes between South Korea and the United States. I don't know what they would do about Canada and Mexico because they can't disrupt that. But let's assume there was really, you were afraid that in wartime, there would be a real lack of supply of steel. What could you do? I think that the main thing that, the proper way to deal with that is for the Defense Department, out of defense spending, to pay the steel industry to mothball some plants, to keep them operational but not producing, so that in an emergency, if the United States needed the steel, those plants, they could quickly hire people and quickly go into operation to provide the steel necessary for production in a time of war. I think that the excuse that we need it is wrong. It's not true, but there's a solution that doesn't involve tariffs that would solve that problem. So, Yaron, why do they have to keep talking about tariffs? Isn't it obvious? No, it's not obvious. You see, unfortunately, most people, and I include some people who follow me here on Facebook and on YouTube, have a zero-sum mentality. They don't understand economics. Economics is not simple. So again, and here I would encourage everybody to read economics in one lesson. And everybody has this sense, okay, if we're importing from China, then they're producing. What will we do? Well, if we're importing from them, it means that we're producing something because we have money that they want. So it's not just paper or junk, it's something they want. So we must be producing something. So even if you can't see the production, it must be there. But you see, we're very visual people. We're very sense-based. Concepts are hard. Abstractions are hard. Economics is hard. So, but the stuff that we buy is all coming in from China. Well, it's not. We produce more than we've ever produced before in the United States in terms of stuff. But we make a lot of our money with the ideas business. We make a lot of money in finance. We make a lot of money selling marketing. We make a lot of money in services. We make a lot of money, in high tech, which is not exactly manufacturing. But you can't see that. It's hard for people to conceptualize that. We've lost jobs in production, making stuff. Of course, again, most of those jobs are lost to robots, not to China. But wait, we used to make televisions, now we don't. We used to make these things, now we don't. So people have a very perceptual. They see stuff and they see that China is making it all and that we're buying it. And then they see trade as zero sum. So the Chinese are getting our money. All our money is going to China. And we're getting these televisions. It's just a consumption good. It's just going to break down at some point. They never took the class, I guess. Or it never, maybe they did take the class. It never integrated. It never sunk in. The trade is fundamentally win-win. That if I'm buying a TV from China or an automobile from China, China's going to become one of the biggest manufacturers of automobiles in the world. If I buy an automobile from China, I'm winning. I'm winning. Because I get an automobile that's worth to me more than the money I gave up. And the Chinese are winning. Because they got the money. They didn't need the automobile. What they wanted the dollars. Now, what did they want the dollars for? So they can buy American stuff. But they don't buy that much American stuff. Okay, maybe they will in the future. But even if they don't buy a lot of American stuff, what else do they want the dollars for? So they can invest in America because it's still the best place in the world to invest. The reason we have a trade deficit is not because we don't produce enough stuff. It's because the Chinese want to invest in America and they need dollars. So they make stuff that we will buy so that they can get the dollars to be able to invest in America. But these are complex ideas. Now, also, there's the moral issue. A tariff is a tax. Well, it's also an economic issue. It's both. A tariff is a tax. You don't solve economic problems by increasing taxes. But that's what increasing a tariff is. But people think that if you increase a tariff, you're penalizing the Chinese. A little bit, because they'll sell fewer goods in the United States because prices went up. But the people you're really penalizing are American consumers. So it's lose-lose. Tariffs are lose-lose. The Chinese lose and Americans lose. Everybody loses. But again, to see it is an abstraction. It's difficult. I saw a statistic recently, and I think this is true, although it probably underestimates the case. For poor Americans and lower middle class Americans, trade with China results in a net positive of $2,300 a year in terms of higher standard of living, or in terms of cheaper goods. $2,300 a year for poor and lower middle class Americans directly from trade with China. Now, I think that underestimates the case. I think it's more than that. And I think it's not just poor middle class, low middle class Americans. All Americans benefit from it. Okay, here we go again, right? But the Chinese are cheating and stealing, so we can't treat them as just a trade opportunity. We're stealing too, and we're cheating. We bailed out the American auto industry. We bailed out all our banks. That's a direct subsidy. I would call that cheating in a free market. We subsidize a lot of our industries in the United States. You know, the Chinese just increased tariffs in retaliation on soybeans. And on, soybeans are heavily subsidized in the United States. That's cheating. You really want to get into this cheating stuff? Now, what are they stealing? If they're stealing, then don't buy their stuff. But again, don't raise tariffs. Tariffs is just a tax on yourself. If a certain product coming from China is a product of theft, don't buy it. The government should ban it. Just like the government bans, like if you're in a thrift store and you're selling stolen goods, the police come and shut down the thrift store. Shut down trade with China in those goods that you know are stolen. You know, have some balls. I'm all for banning trade in stolen goods, but tariffs are stupid. They're just not the way to do it. I think people are worried that jobs rather than income are being destroyed by trade, but that's just false. That is just absolutely unequivocally wrong. And again, go read Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Go read any economic textbook written in the last 100, 200 years to see why that is wrong. It is plain wrong. More jobs are created from trade. Many, many more jobs are created from trade than are destroyed from trade. So yes, people are afraid, and our idiot politicians and our idiot intellectuals feed that fear and encourage that fear, but there is nothing, zero in reality to justify that fear. But the West has to defend the banks, and the crisis was a direct result of socialist policies, and China's cheating and stealing, all connected. The hysteria is quite... USA has to defend the nation from the communists. Oh my God, the commies are coming. Really? Sorry, I don't mean to laugh at you, but it's pretty funny. Your hysteria is pretty funny. No, the U.S. has to defend itself from stupid Americans, from idiotic presidents, from Paul Krugman and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. That's what we need to defend ourselves from. China is not a threat to U.S. sovereignty. China is not a threat to U.S. prosperity. China is not a threat to anything U.S. The real threat in the U.S. is you. It's people who think trade is bad. That is the real threat. The real threat to America today is people who believe that trade is bad. People who believe that raising tariffs is good threatens my life as an American more than any Chinese person does. Again, if China steals intellectual property, don't allow that property in. Oh, here we go. The international communists are going to destroy capitalism, and China is the epicenter of their strategy. All right, reading more conspiracy theory books. I love it. No, the international communists are out there. There are a few still left, mainly in American universities. I don't think there are any communists in China. Not communists in that sense. There are authoritarians in China, but there's nothing communist about China. There's no rise of the proletarian. There's no attempt to benefit the proletarian. The state in China owns fewer and fewer means of production every year. They privatize. They don't privatize enough. They should be privatizing a lot more. They privatize more and more of the means of production. China is much more a mixed economy leaning towards fascism than it is communism. I mean, really, people, before you mouth off talking about communism or fascism or trade or anything, do a little research, just a little bit. Communist countries don't have skyscrapers. Communist countries don't have Alibaba. Communist countries don't have entrepreneurs. Communist countries don't have private income. That's not communism. It still might be bad. In the case of China, it's still bad, but it's not communism. There's nothing communist except for the name of the political party in China today. Now, I know you read conspiracy theories and books instead of actually going to China and seeing it. Go to China, visit China. You go find a communist in China. A real communist, a proletarianly active. I mean, in many respects, Argentina is more socialist than China. Go find a real advocate for the proletarian. You know that China has very little welfare? You know that China doesn't have socialized medicine? Internet, here he goes again. International communists are running rampage in the EU too. No, they're not. They're a bunch of statist, power-lusting, impotent, bureaucratic, horrible people. But they're not communists. They're just not communists. They're certainly not international. You know what international communist usually is a code word for? It's usually a code word for Jews. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's coming next. There is no communist ideology in China. So I've spoken in China. I've been to universities in China. I've spoken to businessmen in China. I've spoken to students in China. I've spoken to thinkers in China, economists in China. And it's quaint at the university that they have a Marxist study program. It's not really that serious. It's not really that serious. I remember the head of the Marxist faculty came to my talk at the university in Xi'an in China. I had 150 students. They made posters for my talk. They were massive posters, the biggest posters I've ever seen at any universities to encourage people to come to my talk. And the posters were the morality of capitalism. Come and hear defense of the morality of capitalism by Yaron Brook with a picture of my name. Ayn Rand was splattered all over this poster in Xi'an, in the middle of China, at a university. And the head of the Marxist department came. And the questions they asked were not communist questions. They didn't know anything about communism. They don't know Marx. They don't care about Marx. There are no Marxists, serious Marxists, as a significant percentage of people in China. The questions they asked were Keynesian. They asked about, consumption, and they asked about the Great Depression, and they asked about the financial crisis, and they asked questions that were exactly the same as the questions you would have gotten at an American university. To think that Chinese students at Chinese universities are learning anything different than what we are teaching our students in our universities in economics and in business, you don't know what you're talking about. I encourage you, before you speak, to go to China. Oh, they're playing me. That's right. They're playing me, who actually went to China, talked to people in the streets, actually engaged with them. And they're not playing you, who's read a few books and thinks he knows something. You don't know anything. All right. Enough of Mr. More Than Exist, or whatever it's called on YouTube. But it's good. It's good to have these trollers, because they give me stuff to talk about. I just don't understand it. I just don't understand it. That there's any support out there for tariffs, for trade war with China, for restrictions on bringing automobiles into the United States. There's just no reason for it. Zero. I mean, literally zero. No excuse. For every single one of the objections I've heard, there's nothing else. There's nothing. There's nothing to justify it. Okay. All right. Yeah, go read Atlas Shrugged. So where were we? Yeah. So if we want to be like Argentina, if we want to be poor, then keep electing in the United States, keep electing populist presidents who demonize free trade, who demonize capitalism, who don't have a clue about economics, who advocate for nationalist policies. If you keep voting for people like that, you will get Argentina in the United States. Instead of Argentina becoming America, it seems that the world is heading towards a situation where America is going to become more like Argentina, which is sad. Now, hopefully, we can turn things around in Argentina, because they know, see, this is the difference between Argentinians and Americans. They know, at least there's a percentage of them that knows, that this crap doesn't work. They've lived it. They know that these policies are suicide. They've lived them. We in the United States, we think we could dabble with socialism. We think we could dabble with protectionism. We think we can dabble with statism. We think we can dabble with fascism and still get away with it, because we're ignorant and naive and complacent. Very, very, very complacent. All right. Let's see. Oh, Brazil. I'm in Brazil. I'm in beautiful. Well, it's a beautiful day. Let me just say, wow, I've had the best weather. As soon as I left Buenos Aires, it started pouring rain, and supposedly they're going to have rain all of this week. I arrived in Porto Alegre. The sun is shining. First time ever in Porto Alegre. And the sun is shining, and it's a beautiful, beautiful day. It's just gorgeous. And it's been like this, and it's supposed to be like this for the rest. Just before I get to that, should people read the Fountainhead before Atlas? It depends. It depends on your way of thinking. Some people should definitely read the Fountainhead before Atlas. The more politically minded, the more big scope, the more big ideas, the more you're focused on the world, the more you should read Atlas first. The more it's about you personally, if you're an artist, if you're an architect, if you're concerned about personal morality, you should start with Fountainhead. So here's a sexist thing to say. I think most women should start with the Fountainhead. Men, it depends, but I think most women, I'm going to get in trouble now, I'm sure. Okay, so here I am in Porto Alegre. I'm looking out the window of my hotel. I'm on the 18th floor. I've got a nice view of the city. And it's not only is it great weather, much better weather than the two other times I've been here. This is my third time in Porto Alegre. But Brazil seems to be in better shape. There seems to be a certain, vibrancy in the air here. There seems to be a certain optimism in the air. So when I was here 2 years ago, it was just when they were impeaching the president. And everybody was following the radio because the impeachment was going on, and it was very suspenseful. And of course, she was impeached. All because of a massive corruption investigation that has been going on in Brazil the last few years. And really, thumbs up to Brazil and all the credit to Brazilians for supporting the corruption investigation, for supporting its conclusions. Thumbs up to the court system that has backed up the prosecutors and backed up the judges who have prosecuted the corruption investigation. Because what they basically discovered is the depths to which the political class in Brazil is corrupt. And by the way, this investigation, which started in Brazil, has now spread to all of Latin America. So I'm hearing from Colombia that's quite a few politicians are now under indictment for corruption, all kind of linked to the same big businesses, the bribes that they were paying these businesses all over Latin America. And of course, we've known in theory, we've known in practice, this has been going on for decades. This has been going on for the last 100 years. But Brazil seems to be taking seriously the idea of rooting out corruption from politics. Now, I think they've got a long, long way to go. And as I've said many times, you cannot uproot corruption from politics unless you separate politics from economics. But this investigation, which started a few years ago, has basically now indicted dozens of politicians, including the former president, who was very, very popular, a real leftist, a real populist, a real disaster, whose name is Lula in Brazil, as you might know from following soccer or football, as it is properly named. A lot of Brazilians go by one name, a lot of famous Brazilians, whether it's Pelé, Jorginho, or Lula. Lula was charged with corruption at about the same time that his protege, the woman who took over from him, who became president after him, about the same time she was impeached. He was charged. He's gone to trial. He's lost the trial. He was found guilty, and he was sentenced 12 years in jail. This is a former president of a relatively authoritarian country where you don't think that a former president would actually go to jail. But he has been charged, found guilty, and sentenced to 12-year jails. And then yesterday, just as I was landing, because I always come to Brazil when there's drama, the court ruled against his appeal and ruled that he must be arrested and taken to jail. Now, supposedly he went to one of the big unions that has always been supportive of him, and he has been there kind of refusing to turn himself in so far. Last time I looked at the news, they were reporting that he was going to be turning himself in. I don't know if that's happened. I'm sure my Brazilian listeners are probably very closely monitoring the news. But, they're going to arrest. If he doesn't turn in, they're going to have to go and arrest him. And they don't want to go and arrest him because they don't want to start violence. They don't want to turn him into a martyr. So they are going to wait him out, I think, for him to actually surrender himself. He's 72 years old. He claims he will comply with the warrant for his arrest and surrender himself. We'll see if that happens. He's being convicted of basically fraud. This is part of this massive anti-corruption operation, which has taken down so many politicians here. And this is fantastic news for all of Latin America. By the way, the president of Peru had to resign as a consequence of the ripple effects of all these investigations. These investigations into corruption in Latin America have now spread from Brazil to Peru to Colombia to all over Latin America, or much of Latin America. And they are bringing the powerful, they are bringing these horrible politicians who thought they were immune to any consequences. They're bringing them down, and it is amazing, and it is cool, and it is wonderful. It is really, really wonderful. And it's great to see. It's inspiring, and I think the Brazilians I see here. I mean, last time they were like, wow, we can impeach the president. This time, this is 2 years after they did impeach the president. Part of that impeachment process was hundreds of thousands of young Brazilians going out into the streets and demanding justice. It's a beautiful thing. I think as we left, a protest started in Rio, and it was really lucky because we would have been shut down. You couldn't move in Rio when those protests were happening. But it's a really amazing things to see. Now, there are a lot of steps that still need to be taken. But one of the first steps towards freedom is recognizing the evil of the establishment as it exists and recognizing that corruption is unacceptable and being willing to do something about it, to actually put the bastards in jail. I wish we in America were willing to do something about it. I mean, I've got a list of politicians that I think should be in jail because of corruption. I mean, literally corruption, the kind of corruption we're talking about here. Oh, Augustina on Facebook is just telling me that Christina Kirchner, the Kirchner, the president, the former president, that's right, I remember reading a story about this. She's being indicted now, again about corruption. So this is spreading throughout Latin America, and it's fantastic. I mean, I'd love to see Dodd and Frank in the United States being indicted for corruption because of all the money they got from Freddie and Fannie. Maybe still getting from Freddie and Fannie, who knows? Maybe they've got a retirement fund with Freddie and Fannie. I mean, and these are all populist, leftist politicians. These are all, statist, anti-freedom politicians. It's fantastic. It really is fantastic to see people waking up to that. And then you see the vibe in Latin America right now that is leaning towards more freedom, not thrusting towards more freedom, not understanding what more freedom means, not engaged in pro-capitalism, but leaning towards more freedom. And all you need to raise the standard of living significantly is a lean. It's pretty amazing. You don't need that much. Human productivity does not need that much to be unleashed. I think partially helping all this is an understanding of how bad things are in Venezuela. Certainly the elections in Colombia, which are probably going to see the victory of the center-right party, Uribe's old party, which was very good economically for Colombia. The president, this new president, if he gets elected, hopefully he'll get elected, has actually, I think, read one of my books and has read some Ayn Rand and really, I think, has the potential to be pretty good. I think a big part of why Colombia is swinging towards, again, a lean towards freedom, not a commitment to freedom, but a leaning towards freedom, is because of what's happening in Venezuela. And they're, of course, getting this mass refugee migration into Colombia from Venezuela as starving people leave Venezuela and escape socialism. And of course, their closest neighbor is Colombia, and you're seeing a stream of people coming into Colombia. And I think Colombians are realizing that if they elect the wrong president, they will be Venezuela, and there's probably nowhere for them to run. There's nowhere for them to go. So it's good news. What can I say? It's good news. It's good news when corrupt politicians in Latin America are going to jail, not because the military took over and is punishing them, but because the people are demanding it, because the people are fed up, because the people have had it. And justifiably, and because the justice system is working. That's another thing that's new for Latin America and very exciting. The idea of equality before the law, the idea that law applies to everybody, even the powerful. Again, I wish that were the case, more so the case in the United States. But the idea that the equality before the law applies even to the powerful, even to the politically powerful. Oh man, that is such a powerful idea. And it's not something that existed in Latin America in the past. You could get away with murder. Right? You could get away with murder. And politicians did. And there were no consequences. And you could be corrupt and there were no consequences. You might be elected out of office, but there were no consequences. And now, for the first time, really, I think, maybe somebody who knows Latin American history better than I do. For the first time, there's a wave of consequences for bad, corrupt politicians. Consequences meaning jail time. That's powerful. That is really powerful. So let me just say, so I'm in Brazil. I'm in Porto Alegre. I'm going to give one, two, three, four, five, six talks here, I think. Yesterday was probably the smallest group I'll have, which was about 30 people. I did 2 hours on objectivism, just objectivism. It was billed as a seminar on objectivism. Most of the people there were students. I'd say 2/3 of them had read something by Ayn Rand, a third hadn't read anything. So it was great. Had a lot of fun. Really, actually, very impressed with the questions. Usually, questions always go to politics or economics. We really dug into deep questions about epistemology, the efficacy of reason, evolutionary psychology. We went to a lot of questions about ethics, questions about the differences between religion and communism and fascism and atheism. And really good session, deep questions. Hopefully, I gave good answers, but it was a really engaged group with a lot of back and forth, and really good stuff. So that was yesterday. Today, in about 2 hours, I'm going to give a talk at a conference here, Atlantico, which is a conference they hold every year about this time, for students about free markets. And I will give a talk about the role of government. I've got an hour for a talk and a Q&A, and that'll be at one of the universities here. But this is a conference. I don't know how many kids there'll be there. I'm guessing 80 to 100, maybe more. Then on Monday, I'm talking, I think, Monday, I'm talking at a high school and a university. And then Tuesday, I'm talking at a university again. I think that's okay, something like that. So these will be smaller because they'll be classrooms. But I spoke at this high school 2 years ago. Terrific kids, really engaged, great conversation, great discussion. I use that class a lot when I do my talks, because I often say, because I ask the kids, where does food come from? And my idea was to move towards the idea that food comes from the use of reason. And somebody said the supermarket, and I thought that was hysterical, and they use that example a lot. Anyway, I'm going back to that school, and then I'm doing the big talk. It's a short talk, but it's a big talk at the Liberty Forum here in Porto Alegre. It's a forum put on by the IEE, which is kind of a think tank, or more like a business organization that tends to be free market. And I'll have 6,000 people in the audience. 6,000 people in the audience when I talk at Liberty Forum. I mean, assuming everybody's there, so maybe there won't be 1,000, maybe it'll only be 5,000 people. But I've spoken at this event twice before. Great feedback. I have more followers on Facebook from Brazil than any other country in the world other than the United States. And I think a lot of that is a consequence of the fact that I've been to Porto Alegre a couple of times, and I've spoken here. I've also spoken in Rio and Porto Alegre, and São Paulo. But it's primarily Porto Alegre with this Liberty Forum where you speak to thousands of people. So it's going to be a blast. The people here are amazing. They're very motivated. They're very excited. They seem to respond well to me. It's fun. It's a well-educated group. They're young. They're energized. Typically, the people I meet here in their 20s. Yesterday, I was at a party after my talk, and there were, lots of 20-year-olds, really good-looking men, women, 20-year-olds, and fun and engaged and interested and motivated and very ambitious. Very ambitious. It's great to see professionals, all professionals, all probably from the upper middle class and the wealthy in Brazil. But it's fantastic to see. It's fantastic to engage with these people, and they're the ones putting on all these events, and they're the ones organizing everything for me here. And I'm thrilled to be here, and hopefully, I'm sure I will be here again in the future. I think a lot of Brazilians really have the sense that we're witnessing history right now with the arrest of Lula. This is really history. Now what they need, and I think they understand this, I think a significant number of them understand this. Now what they need is the foundational principles on which to build a proper, free capitalist society. And that's what I'm here to help them do. So, and I think that's what they view me being here as helping them to do. And there are other thinkers that are here as well. I'm not the only, there are other free market thinkers coming in for this week. And it's good. It's good. Let's see. Oh, I'll just mention this just in case you're listening for one of these countries. But on Wednesday next week, I fly to Serbia. I'll be speaking there on Saturday. Then I go to Budapest in Hungary. I'll be speaking in Budapest on Monday on Monday. Yes, on Monday. And then I go to Kiev. I'll be speaking in Kiev on Tuesday and Wednesday. Then I go to Tbilisi in Georgia, where I'll be speaking on Friday. You can find a lot of this information on my website and on the website of the Ayn Rand Institute. So if you want to follow me, and I'll be doing more shows now. It looks like I'll be doing the show with Amy tomorrow. At least I'm going to try, if my technology can sustain it from my hotel room here. I have to use different technology for the show with Amy because I have to use Zoom, and we'll see if that'll work here. But we're going to try to do the show tomorrow from here. And then as I go on the road in these different countries, and I'll talk more about Brazil after I've done more events here, and our challenge really is going to be, I think, in Brazil, is it's a vast country. It's got over 200 million people. Is how do we get these ideas, out there? How do we get these ideas out there to the people? Again, first step, the recognition of the corrupt nature of their political system they have achieved, and that's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's good to see. All right. Oh, by the way, at OCON this year, I will be giving a talk on, and this will be interesting, and I think controversial in objectivism. I'm going to be giving a talk on how to be a rational optimist. So how to be positive in spite of all the negativity going on in the world. So I'm going to give a talk about all the good things happening in the world today, and why you should focus on them just as much as you should focus on all the bad things happening in the world today. And then you have to balance them out, but basically do that. Hey, thank you for KD Motor for just doing like a super chat on YouTube and contributing a little bit of money to the cause. All right. If you want to support what I do, if you want to support all my travels and all the talks that I give, and my presence here in Brazil and my presence later on in Eastern Europe, if you want to support the podcasts and everything that I do, please go to either paypal.me/Yaron Brook Show, and you can contribute a one-time sum there, or you can go to patreon.com/Yaron Brook Show, where you can make a monthly contribution anywhere from $1 to the sky's the limit. And think of it as an investment. Think of an investment in the future of the world, not just the future of the United States, of the world. I am your messenger to the world. Hopefully you think I do a good job, but I am bringing Ayn Rand's ideas, or my understanding of my ideas, my interpretation of Ayn Rand's ideas to the world. I try to do as good of a job as I can. I try to bring these ideas to as many people as I can, both in person, because I think there's great power in doing it in person, and of course through the power of the web. Some of my events this week are going to be taped, and many of them will go up online over time. I think some of certainly the debate in Argentina, which was mostly in Spanish, is already up online. You can see it on YouTube. You can see it on Facebook. But other events will also be taped and go up online over time. So if you want to support all those efforts, including the efforts to put them up online and to keep them all archives and to create marketing around them to get people to watch them, go to patreon.com or to paypal.com and invest in your future, in my future, in the future of the world. And of course, I know some of you would like me to do more of this stuff in the United States. I would like to do more of this stuff in the United States. But the fact is, right now, for this kind of stuff, for public speeches and interaction, personal face-to-face interaction, there's more demand from me around the world than there is in the United States. I'll also say that I'm one of the only people out there who's willing to do the kind of travel and bear the kind of nutty schedule that is necessary to go to all these places. There's plenty of people doing work in the U.S., but to travel all over the world to do this kind of stuff requires a certain effort, which I'm willing to do, which not everybody is. On top of that, I think I'm pretty good at it, and people out here seem to think so, so they keep inviting me back. Hit them up is asking, how much does it cost? I'm not sure what you mean, how much does it cost? How much does what cost? How much do I charge, in a sense? I'm charging right now, I charge right now $4,000 per lecture. That is my fee. That covers all my travel expenses, covers everything, and I travel business class. But my charge is $4,000 a lecture. A lot of that the Ironman Institute pays through its international programs. It raises money for that, and it pays me to do these things. I'm hoping that in the future, more and more local groups in these different countries are able to raise enough money to be able to pay me directly. That's what I'd like to do. I think this year I will give more talks outside the United States than inside the United States. I'm going to do 40 talks outside the United States. My year starts October 1 through September 30th. I think I'll do 40 talks. I haven't counted how many US talks I've done, but I think it's going to be less than 40. In past years, I've done over 100 talks with about half and half. So we will see. We will see. But if you want me to come and talk at your campus, at your business, I do a lot of business talks. If you want me to come to talk to your political group or your industrial group or your anything, basically, if you wanted me to talk, organize a talk, raise the money and bring me to your city, and I would love to do it. Is Washington, D.C. in the future of my travel? No. I mean, I have to say, I hate Washington, D.C. probably more than any city I know. I used to love Washington, D.C., and it's because of the contrast between the Jefferson Monument and everything that everything Jefferson represents, and the inhabitants over the last 20 years of the White House and Congress. It just, I expect corruption and populism and incompetence and just awfulness in capitals all over the world that I go to. I have a romantic vision of Washington, D.C. about what was possible, what is possible. And so I suffer more in D.C. than in any other city in the world. I just hate it. But if I'm invited, I will go there. I think it's somewhat futile to talk to politicians. But if there's other people who would like to have me come and give talks, I am thrilled to speak anyway, including D.C. So invite me, and I will come. So, and that's I guess the general principle is send me an invitation. All right, I really need to run because they're going to pick me up in like 20 minutes to give this talk at the Atlantis conference, which is going to be a lot of fun. I don't think that's being live streamed, but I will try to let you know when things are being live streamed. Thank you all for listening on YouTube, on Facebook, and of course on Blog Talk Radio. I will probably talk to all of you tomorrow with Amy if I can figure out how to pull it all off. I'm really going to try, but we will see. Bye, everybody.